Hello, this is John Cutler, and this is a tool that I have used privately to diagnose issues with teams and to think about where they might focus their improvement efforts. I'm going to share it with you. Hopefully, after I'm done explaining it, it will make more sense. In this particular drawing, you can pretty much start anywhere and you can just follow the path. So, for example, strategy should inform org structure, and org structure then maybe informs our architecture, and architecture will have an impact on the dependencies that we have. Dependencies will impact the agency that teams have. The strategy will also improve our confidence levels. We know why we're doing what we're doing. Confidence also improves agency. Then agency helps you focus. Agency gives teams optionality. Optionality improves flow. Focus improves decision quality. Decision quality also improves optionality. With flow, then you kind of can build stuff. That's what flow is. You can get stuff out the door. Getting stuff out the door produces impact. Ideally, you can understand whether what you're doing makes any sense. Of course, if you do understand what you're doing, that will improve decision quality and improve your strategy, and it will also make you more confident about what you're doing. Strategy will also improve decision quality. And your situational awareness tends to impact how you think about funding things, which impacts incentives. Funding has a huge impact on your strategy. Incentives has a huge impact on your org structure, on and on and on. You can see how this works. When I use this, I start asking teams questions about issues that they see or where the pain is. But I wanted to go through a couple important principles that I use when I look at this. So the first is that there are no silver bullet interventions here. You're not looking at this to find one thing, like if we could just improve incentives, then it would fix everything. That tends to not be how things work. While you can't be sure about where exactly to focus, there are some things that tend to encourage good things. So for example, if you don't have flow, if you can't build anything, get anything out the door, it's kind of going to gunk up the system a little bit. Situational awareness is also one of those things where if you focus on that, even if things aren't going all that great, at least you can understand why they're not going so great. There are other places which can be really thorny. You're not going to get that same kind of effect. You can't just say, everyone be confident, or everyone, you're empowered. Those tend not to be places where you're going to necessarily get a lot of traction. Although, some agency can help you fix the other things. Like you might need agency in order to even have situational awareness. The next principle is that the relationships matter. So you're almost never acting on one thing. A great example of this is this triangle of org structure, purpose, and architecture. If you have an amazing strategy, but your org chart is not aligned with that strategy, that's not going to work. If your org structure is perfect, but it doesn't really align with your architecture, well, there's going to be tension there. If your strategy doesn't align with your architecture, it's going to be there. You're never just acting on one thing. You might be improving one thing. It's going to kind of push the issue around, and you're going to have to consider more than one object. So you're never looking at things in isolation. The next thing is that inertia glosses over problems for a really long time. And this is what you notice a lot in organizations where, for example, they'll just be shipping like crazy, and maybe they had early product market fit and things are just going. And this is just cranking right over here. And you could do that for a long time and you'll start to experience a lot of issues over here in your architecture and your org chart. You won't really need to refine your strategy because everything's going really, really well. And so success in one part here can create a lot of inertia and can gloss over problems for a while. So sometimes that's a useful part of this tool, is to think about the big picture about where things are going. The next thing is that you tend to hit local maximums and then the constraint shifts. This is classic theory of constraints. You could improve your data and your situational awareness. You could keep improving that and improving it. At a certain point, that's just going to shift the issue somewhere else. You might need to really work on converting that into strategy or making sure that it's actually being translated into decisions. So in classic theory of constraints, as you improve one thing, it kind of pushes the issue over to other things. The next is that some things tend to get overlooked or shortchanged because they are hard and they take a while. So for example, this architecture dependency part, it tends to be the thing that people just punt on all the time, yet it can be critical. The same thing with maybe getting your data picture set, or you continue to fund projects instead of funding teams, for example. There's some thorny areas that people tend to avoid, and it comes back to bite them afterwards. The next thing is that confidence and trust takes reps. So you could think of this as a little bit of a flywheel here. And what you're trying to do when you're trying to improve things is to get this flywheel going. And that's obviously where leadership comes in, right? Leadership can create support to get this flywheel going, but often people are very aspirational about the changes they want. And ultimately, you have to get around this loop a couple times and show people the impact to spin up that flywheel. And that's where it takes reps to be able to do that. Some things are harder to get reps on. This rep right here is notoriously difficult to kind of get around that loop. But if you can at least accelerate a bit your situational awareness there and make sure that you do your best to maybe progressively adapt your architecture, it can be huge. Next, things are always shifting, improving, integrating. You're never done tending the garden. There's entropy everywhere. If you're having any kind of success, your strategy is probably shifting a little bit, and you're getting more data and you're understanding. You could imagine this as this system here, but nothing ever glows green forever. There's entropy, and you always have to think about where you want to tend the garden. Everything is generally fading over time. And then sometimes you have these positive loops that are also holding things in place and you're getting impact. The next thing is your place in the org will dictate which layers you can control. There's a good chance, if you're a senior PM, you're not going to be able to fix the incentive alignment org structure architecture problem. That's just the reality. But you can focus over here in the decision quality flow and optionality part of the equation. So that's where you might focus. The way that I use this with teams is I walk through this diagram with them and, we'll say something like, hey, how's your strategy at the moment? We'll talk about that. And we'll just sort of work around the loop using this as a conversation piece. What's your confidence in the strategy? How much agency or independence do you have? How's the focus of teams right now? You can really start anywhere and you use this as a tool to have a good discussion. Hopefully this is interesting.